we've talked about how OpenClaw is giving people the ability to make their own agents based on this foundational framework. What your newsletter was focused on today is how those agents are getting better and how they're learning to do more things. And you gave a really great technical explanation of it in the newsletter. So explain it to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reality with a lot of agents is that they just don't always get things right the first try, right out of the box when you set them loose on some task. I'll give you an example. I've asked agents to summarize the day's funding rounds for me. I say, go out on the internet, find me all of the AI funding rounds I should know about. And they make mistakes. They butcher explanations, they get details wrong. And the way I correct that is I prompt better, right? I adjust my prompt. I give it more thorough explanations. I say, these are the details I want about a company. These are the funding rounds you should pay attention to. And I refine my prompt. A skill, which is how we're teaching agents to sort of improve their expertise over time, is exactly that. It's just a text prompt stored as a markdown file on your computer. It would say something like, this is your skill for summarizing the day's funding rounds. And then before the agent goes off and pursues that task, it refreshes its memory. It reads my instructions, and it remembers all of the tips and tricks, the best techniques, the tools it should use, and then it applies that information when it goes out to complete the task. And it turns out this can really improve the agent's performance on a range of things. It could be summarizing the day's funding rounds like I'm doing. It could be transcribing a YouTube video. It could be how to use Google Cloud, how to edit a PDF. I mean, you name it, people are figuring out skills for these tasks, and now they're sharing the skills with each other. So OpenClaw in particular has a repository of these skills. It's called Claw Hub, and anyone can go along and say, look, I think I really figured out how to instruct my agent to edit a PDF. Here's my PDF editing skill, and they can share it with the world. Other people can download it, tweak it, refine it, and share it again.
Okay, so just to play it back for you. So we've got these agents that are learning how, I mean, people can create new agents with OpenClaw. These agents can do a variety of things. The way that the agents learn how to do those new things is through these skills, I guess. And there's a library of those skills. Now, one clarification question I have for you is, if I make an agent, okay, is it that to make a new agent, I have to then consult that library of skills, or is it that I already have an agent and I want it to expand its capabilities, and that's when the skill comes into play?
Exactly. It's the second. It's that once the
Okay.
agent already exists, it has this library of skills that it can draw on to accomplish different tasks. So you can think of it like when the agent is going to accomplish some task, it just sees the spine of the book. It sees the title. And if it
Right.
realizes that some skill might be relevant, it says, oh, I'm supposed to edit a PDF. Here I have a skill that's labeled PDF editing. It might open up that skill. It might load it into its context and refresh its memory on how to do that. So it has this bank of skills that are
Right.
available at any time, but they're available to the agent once the agent already exists.
And so, in other words, I basically, they call it the AI personal assistant, right? In the same way, we all have our own iPhone screen, our own Chrome, whatever. I mean, it's installing extensions basically, or apps in some ways to my AI personal assistant. I want it to not just be able to summarize the PDFs, but I also want it to be able to translate, and I also want it to be able to rearrange my desktop screen, for example. These are skills that
Exactly,
it has to learn.
exactly. And like you say, in some ways, this comes very naturally to us as humans, right? We have books on the shelf, and if we want to refresh our memory, we can take one out. Or we have a file system on our computer where we store our notes. And if we want to refresh our memory about what a conversation involved, we can take a look at those notes. Or even instruction manuals for debugging household appliances. Like when my Microsoft is when my microwave is wigging out, I like take out the microwave manual and I debug the microwave. In some ways, it's very similar to that.
Yeah. Only on TITV do we mix up Microsoft with microwaves.
That's right.
Okay, but so now my question for you is, did OpenClaw invent this system of learning new skills? Because I can certainly recall, with OpenAI, for example, I mean, we've heard these stories about, people having different GPTs and having different chatbots to do different things. I mean, didn't something like this already exist?
That's right. That's right. Having custom GPTs was an early run at this idea. I think we haven't heard as much about that idea lately, but skills, I think Anthropic was the first to get there and sort of started supporting skills as a type of package that users could use with Claude Code. OpenAI also supports it with Codex, and now it's become sort of an open source standard. So there are lots of repositories and libraries online where you can find these different skills.
Now, one thing that you said in your newsletter is you called this system of consulting a library to learn new skills. You called that you said it might seem like a duct tape solution compared to rethinking AI models from the ground up. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we were just talking about, that humans sort of naturally store notes for themselves that they can consult at a later date. That's sort of the best case for skills. That's the case that makes them seem like the most natural solution for agents. On the other hand, it's a little bizarre, or like it's a little janky. It doesn't come across as an elegant solution. Think about how you would pick up a new skill. There's an example of this that I really like. Dorkesh Patel uses, like, imagine you're going to learn the saxophone. How do you learn that? You try it out. You play a few notes. You get high level instructions from a teacher. You get low level instructions from a teacher. You try it again. You try it again. You get better. You get faster. You get sharper. Skills are more like, instead, what if you had one student come along, they try one note, you force the student to write some notes to themselves about how they could do it better, and then a new student comes in the room, reads those notes, and tries to do the saxophone itself. And you just repeat this process. You can't imagine that the students would ever learn how to play the saxophone in a satisfying way from this process. Humans pick things up over time in a really natural and dynamic and flexible way. They try new things and explore. They're able to reflect and realize what worked for them and what didn't work for them, and they just improve over time. And that's a mode of learning that, in general, isn't available to AI systems right now. Either they learn all at once ahead of time during training, or they learn over the course of a conversation, but then the conversation ends and they typically forget everything. So skills are one sort of intermediate solution, one attempt to say, let's remember the key things that worked in this conversation so we can draw on them at a later date. But compared to the ways that humans do this over the course of learning some new task, skills can feel kind of janky. They can feel like a duct tape solution. And in fact, a
Mm.
lot of AI researchers are going back to the drawing board. They're saying, the existing ways that we get AIs to do so-called continual learning and picking up new skills over their lifetime on the fly is just not satisfying. It's not a natural and organic solution. So, for example, we reported that Jerry Tworek's new startup, Core Automation, is going to be rethinking exactly this. They say, we just don't think this kind of learning is possible with our current AI models. And so it's back to the drawing board. We should rethink it. Skills are this kind of intermediate solution. They say, look, given the models we have now, we know they work really well when you feed them text instructions. The text instructions in some ways are quite nice. They're legible, like you or I can just open them up and see the same thing the model sees. They're easy to edit, they're easy to share. Let's see how far we can take them. So that's how skills are developing right now. But there's a question of, are they the end game solution?
And I think one thing that is sort of connecting, and I'm connecting the dots in my mind here as you say this. I think about when I use Gemini or ChatGPT. I know that it is learning from my past conversations. It references back. I think at this point it seems to know that I host a daily show, and that it has a persona. But again, that is just one skill. I mean, we're only talking about chatbots here. What we're talking about is an infinite number of capabilities, really, with agents, and that's where it gets more difficult.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly right. The way these chatbots store memories of you, it sort of takes a few notes to itself over time, and then it
right.
can reference those notes later. If you have a long Claude Code session and eventually the number of words that it has said sort of reaches its limit, it compacts that
Yeah,
context.
yeah.
But when it does that, still a lot gets lost, and you're really relying on the text being rich enough to remember the important things and for the model to retain the stuff that's important. And all of that means that things slip through the cracks and get lost. So I think of those in a similar category as skills, as these kind of workarounds that are getting us there for now, but they don't feel very elegant.
Okay, and last question for you, Rocket. So this ideal state that you're describing, where these agents can learn on the fly and remember the right way to do things, how realistic do people think that
Mhm.
is to attain in
Mhm.
the near future, at least?
I think estimates vary. When people are going off to found a neo lab on this basis, I think they, probably have a thesis in mind. They have a research direction that they think is promising, and they expect to make some traction on it in the next maybe months to a year. I think other people are more pessimistic and think that this is many years out, but it should be possible, right? Because people are able to do it. So that's an existence proof. Um, so,
People can do it, computers can do it.
someday, someday.
Right, right. Great. Well, Rocket, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Rocket Drew, our AI and robotics reporter here at The Information.
Thanks, Akash.